Are you ready to journey together into the depths of mystery?
We are your guides, Simurgh
And Phoenix.
Welcome to Metanoia.
Hey Simurgh, did you know that in 1908, US President Theodore or Teddy Roosevelt declared the Grand Canyon a protected natural area?
Really? I have heard that President Teddy Roosevelt was the one who established environmental conservation in the US, so it does make sense.
Exactly. So, 11 years later, this natural wonder was designated as a national park. But before the declaration became official, many adventurers embarked on one last expedition to discover the secrets of this vast area. One of these adventurers was G.A. Kincaid.
G.A. Kincaid? I don't think I've ever heard of him. What did he do?
Starting from the Colorado River, he led a small expedition into the Grand Canyon, enjoying the scenery and seeking to explore this gold and silver-rich region before restrictions. About 50 kilometers beyond this area, where the Altuvar Crystal Canyon is located, some unusual formations caught Kincaid's eye. He moored his boat near the shore and prepared to examine a site 400 meters above the canyon floor. Kincaid was not mistaken. He discovered a pathway of hundreds of ancient man-made steps eroded by the desert winds.
Wow, that sounds so exciting. Did he climb those steps?
Yeah. He climbed up with great excitement and curiosity and found a man-made cave entrance at the end of the path. Entering the cave and turning on his lamp, Kincaid was shocked by what he saw.
Huh? What did he see inside?
The walls were covered with ancient writings, neither in English nor in the languages of the region's ancient inhabitants. They were nothing but hieroglyphs from ancient Egyptian civilization.
Egyptian civilization? But it thrived thousands of miles away, thousands of years ago.
I know, right? Intrigued, Kincaid raised his lamp a little higher and discovered another tunnel entrance inside the cave. At the time, he couldn't fully realize the significance of his discovery, as the cave was only a small part of a huge mystery. Kincaid, who started to descend this newly discovered tunnel path, took detailed notes of his discovery in his diaries. Here, read his notes.
It says, "The main entrance of the tunnel had a width of 4 meters. When I reached the end, the width had decreased to 3 meters, and I continued on my way. After about 20 meters, I saw that the tunnel was divided into 2, left and right. On both sides, there were chambers resembling living rooms, about 10 to 15 square meters in size. The rooms were entered through oval doors, and the ceilings of each of them were dome-shaped, with holes in the center, designed to allow airflow. The walls between the rooms were about 2 meters thick." Wow, all these rooms are in a tunnel? This is incredible.
Right? And guess what? As Kincaid explored the rooms, he began to realize that he was in a much larger structure than he had thought.
Even larger.
Yup. The network of tunnels and rooms was so vast that Kincaid wrote in his notes that 50,000 people could easily live in these rooms. Some rooms were designed as kitchens and others as storage rooms.
So basically, it was an entire complex down there.
Yeah, exactly. You know, some of the storage rooms even contained pots still filled with seeds. Kincaid found large dining halls and meeting halls in this complex and wrote that many of the rooms, untouched, were still filled with ancient remains, some of which he took with him for further investigation. However, the adventurer had not yet reached the most astonishing points. As he moved deeper into the cave, he discovered more interesting rooms. One of them was a huge metalworking chamber. Here is another note for you to read from Kincaid.
Kincaid says that, "In the metalworking room, I discovered all sorts of tools made of hardened copper. No doubt the people who lived here had a vast knowledge of this ancient and forgotten art of metalworking, a technique that we humans have failed to master for hundreds of years. In another corner of the room, a little more secluded, there were metal smelting benches, various mines, and coal storage. I have not yet been able to determine the source of all these raw materials."
As you can tell, they were incredibly advanced. Kincaid continued to explore, but he couldn't find answers to the questions he had in his head. He didn't yet know who built this place, why, or how. But deep in the tunnels, he found something that made him faint with fear. He found a huge mausoleum chamber filled with shelves from top to bottom, and on each shelf lay mummified people.
I would turn back if I were him. That sounds scary.
You're not wrong. Kincaid actually realized that this was more than an individual cave discovery. He would need help if he was to unlock the secrets of this colossal structure. Kincaid sent some of the remains and pottery he had taken with him to the Smithsonian Museum.
Smithsonian Museum is one of America's oldest and most established museums for professional research.
Yeah, and he also asked for financial and logistical support to further his work. Kincaid thought he had made America's greatest historical discovery, and he was not far wrong, as the Smithsonian immediately approved his request. So much so that the Institute, not wanting to waste any more time, sent a team of 40 scientists, archaeologists, excavators, and hieroglyphic readers, led by Professor S.A. Jordan, to the cave in the Grand Canyon a week later for Kincaid's discovery. The work was suddenly accelerated and detailed. Thanks to the team's efforts, they discovered that the tunnel system was symmetrically designed and that the entire tunnel network intersected in a main hall in the center. Kincaid wrote in his notes that there was a large statue in this main hall, and it looked just like the Buddha. He said that this giant statue was sitting as if meditating and had a lotus flower in each hand.
Huh? A Buddha statue in the Grand Canyon? That's very unexpected.
Right? But Kincaid added in his notes that he asked the scientists why this statue was placed here to represent a religion. But they said, it is very difficult to give a definite answer yet. After the latest professional discoveries, Kincaid and Professor Jordan's team named this cave system the Citadel. It was finally understood that this was no longer a simple cave, but a gigantic underground city where thousands of people lived together.
But I feel like a huge question still remains unanswered. Who exactly built this huge city?
We will get to that soon. In the intervening months and after much research, Kincaid and Professor Jordan's team had discovered hundreds of rooms, grain stores, weapon stores, coal stores, metalworking rooms, kitchens, prayer areas, burial chambers. We're not just talking about empty rooms here. The team found statuettes, swords, shields, pots filled with seeds, gold, tools, and hundreds of clay tablets with hieroglyphic inscriptions. Despite all this, no one could identify who this city belonged to.
For real? But there must have been some sort of clues.
Well, Kincaid noted in his diaries that some of the figures found in the sacred chambers resembled bas-reliefs from ancient South American cultures, but many artifacts were associated with Tibetan and Asian beliefs. Incredibly, most of the artifacts found were associated with Middle Eastern and Egyptian civilizations. But what made things even more surprising was that experts on both Asian and Egyptian religions said that these symbols and writings did not belong to those ancient religions.
Really? That's weird. So, then maybe whoever built this city was a much more advanced and sophisticated civilization than the Indians, or the so-called indigenous inhabitants of the continent, whose history goes back several thousand years. Maybe compared to the Indians, they were very advanced in metalworking, distribution of labor, storage, and architecture. Wait, maybe this civilization didn't even develop in the Americas at all, but came to the continent from the other side of the world.
You're absolutely right. In fact, scientists agree on the things you have just talked about. Kincaid and Professor Jordan sent crates of ancient artifacts and pages of notes to the Smithsonian Institution, which commissioned them for this project.
Did they have, like, a thesis?
Yeah, and you already know that it's your turn to read it.
Again? All right. Let's see. Whoever the civilization that built the Citadel was, it was probably an Asian or Egyptian civilization with a complex social structure, urbanization, architecture, and belief systems that came here even before the Indians, who had been present on the continent for thousands of years. Sounds reasonable.
Yup, so Kincaid and Professor Jordan decided to carry out very detailed research and applied again to the Smithsonian Institute, this time requesting a larger team and financial support. Expecting their request to be accepted as it had been before, Kincaid and his team were bitterly disappointed when the Institute flatly rejected all their requests. Even worse, neither Kincaid nor Professor Jordan was ever heard from again.
What? They just disappeared? Did they just stop working on the project? I wonder what happened to them.
I wonder too.
Now that I think about it, if you explore northern Arizona and the Grand Canyon, you will see that it is not only an area of unparalleled natural beauty, but it is also a very sacred place for Native Americans. The Hopis, Navajos, Zunis, and Apaches are just some of the tribes that called this sacred area home and lived there for hundreds of years. You have studied these ancient cultures, right?
Of course.
So, you will have noticed how complex their mythology and beliefs were, and how vast their knowledge of astronomy. They even had a lot of basic knowledge about ancient aliens, whose secrets we are just discovering today as part of their beliefs.
Tell me more about their beliefs. We don't hear a lot about these things in our history classes, after all.
Okay, let's explore these beliefs together then. According to Hopi myths, the first people of this world came from the Grand Canyon. Based on their legend, long before the present day, a reptilian race emerged from this region and became humanoid. According to Zuni and Acoma beliefs, both reptilian races and giants existed in this region. For years, many professional and amateur archaeologists, especially in the American West, have been reporting to various institutes and universities about the discovery of very large human bones. Although much of this was fake news, there was also a lot of real news.
But why are all these giant human skeletons, despite the official reports of the people who discovered them, still missing?
To understand the answer to this question, you need to look at who was in control of the excavations. The Smithsonian Institute, of course.
Oh, you're absolutely right.
I know that I've said that it is one of America's oldest and most established museums for professional research. But there is more to it. The Smithsonian Institute is not a simple museum management. It is an extraordinary organization funded by very powerful families and the state itself, which has very deep-rooted Masonic beliefs and ties, and which controls almost all of America's historical remains, projects, and files that are considered secret.
Can you please tell us more about Masonic beliefs?
Yeah, of course. So, Freemasonry is a secret organization based on rationality and science. It is not easy to be accepted into the organization because you must undergo various rituals and prove yourself by accomplishing certain tasks.
Certain tasks? Ugh, you mean like eliminating someone who acts against the organization? Please, don't say yes.
Sadly, you are right. Not every movie you watch on TV is fiction. Members of this secret organization recognize each other by the symbols given to them. In future podcasts, we will discuss secret societies in detail. We should also prove to our valuable followers that certain facts that have been characterized as myths or legends throughout history are being covered up by presenting them as fairy tales.
Yeah. For example, suppressed historical myths have long suggested that America was discovered before Christopher Columbus. For years, many people thought this was silly and laughed it off, until it was discovered that North America was actually discovered by Viking explorers hundreds of years before Columbus, and that these pioneers established a settlement in what is now Newfoundland 500 years before Columbus. Beyond that, there is evidence that the Chinese explored this region even before the Vikings and discovered both South and North America.
But, we're talking about something much deeper here, because coastal areas are easy to explore, in the sense that there are natural formations that can be used as harbors. The difficult thing is to move inland and to find shelter there. So we're talking about an ancient civilization building a huge underground city in the heart of America before even Chinese explorers discovered the Americas. Science and archaeology are still searching for answers after 120 years, but the answers may have been right in front of us for years. Once again, we find ourselves studying the ancient myths of the Americas. In the myths of the Hopi, there is a race known as the Ant People. This race was a little smaller than normal humans, with pale skin and very large eyes. According to the legend, over the millions of years that the world has existed, the world has suffered great disasters from time to time and has been on the brink of extinction as a result of these massive destructions. At such a moment of despair, a god came from the sky with a moving star and took the surviving Hopi to the ant gods. Together, the ant race and the rescued Hope waited in a large underground city for the destruction to pass. Then a greater god came from the heavens, entrusted the Hopi to the care of this race, took to the sky again on his flying star, and disappeared from sight.
That's incredible. Are there any other similar legends from other tribes?
Yes, actually. The Toltec tribe tells a legend about the Hamasus. They describe them as a race with golden skin and big eyes. According to the saga, this golden-skinned race lived in huge underground cities and traded with other races in faraway lands.
Sounds like they were quite advanced.
Yes, and according to the tribe, these weapons looked like silver tubes and fired lightning bolts from the end. The weapon was so powerful that it could kill an entire warrior in one shot. The more interesting part of the legend is that this race had canoes made of silver, which they used to move across the sky as if they were floating on water. The tribe said that these canoes made a purring sound as they flew, could make sharp turns like an eagle, and moved very fast.
Okay, these stories are actually very interesting, but please don't mind me asking, why are we talking about these things?
Pay attention to the descriptions in both epics. A race of reptiles, a race of ants, a flying canoe that has similar characteristics to a UFO, almost describing a UFO. Because the people of that period were ignorant of technology, they described everything they saw with animals in nature and their characteristics. They likened the objects that we call UFOs today to a flying canoe that hovers in the air, moves like an eagle, and makes a sound like a purr. They likened the race of ants to ants just because they had big eyes. But maybe this race was just wearing a helmet on its head, and the helmet had big glasses made to make it easier to see. They called the reptilians shape-shifting humanoids, but maybe they were just people wearing protective outer suits, like Iron Man. Maybe that's why they called them shapeshifters. If we always think about this art of imagery and symbolism when analyzing events, many mysteries will be solved by themselves.
Oh my goodness. It's so crazy to think about how these ancient stories might hint at advanced technologies that may have existed long ago.
No matter what faith or culture we look at, we always come across the same story. Gods from the heavens guiding the remaining people after the destruction and floods that took place thousands of years ago across the planet, teaching them civilization, reading and writing, science, and urbanization.
And when we consider all these stories, the theory that this giant underground city found by Kincaid is also the home of a race from those times seems quite plausible.
But if this is really the case, why was the whole project suddenly covered up? And why did Professor Jordan and Mr. Kincaid disappear instead of this being shared with us as one of the greatest archaeological discoveries of humanity?
According to the Smithsonian's press releases, it was a complete hoax, and the museum was never involved and had no knowledge of the events. However, many researchers have found Kincaid's diary and followed its route to the location of this underground city. Jerry Wills and Katie Wills are a couple of amateur archaeologists who have been researching Kincaid's story for years, trying to find this underground city. After years of searching, they found the same staircase that Kincaid discovered.
Finding that worn climbing route confirms Kincaid wasn't lying. There had to be a reason to climb up. Otherwise, why would a climbing route have been carved out of the rocks?
Exactly. However, today it's a federal protected area.
That's frustrating. So we can't just go and explore as we please.
Yeah. In the 120 years since Kincaid's discovery, nearly 1,000 caves have been found in the area. Most of them are categorized as man-made caves, but only 30 caves have been mapped in detail, meaning that 970 caves have been ignored.
And the huge rooms, mummies, statues, and weapons that Kincaid found were in only one cave, right? Imagine what could be in the other caves. It doesn't make sense to build such a massive underground space just for it to be empty and dysfunctional.
The authorities initially called it a lie. Then they set up a climbing route, sent a team, and declared it a federally protected area. They dismiss curious people with statements like, no, it's an empty space. I'm sure you'd be bored.
That's weird. But if this simple and empty pile of stones is just a cave, why is it not allowed to be explored?
Exactly. But some like-minded adventurers, like the Wills couple, have explored the area by secret and illegal means.
And then what happened?
When Jerry and Katie's research team approached this deserted canyon to investigate, they saw an unmarked airplane circling around the canyon. Ignoring this warning, they tried to go further and saw an armed military helicopter making a warning flight. And naturally, they left the area, uneasy about the situation. This area covers 5,000 square kilometers, and the flights only take place in the area described by Mr. Kin in his diary. There were also small resupply areas reinforced with professionally prepared concrete blocks and steel ropes for mountaineer descents.
So you were telling me the authorities who said that the report was false had already taken action and protected the area. Wow. Just wow.
Yes, what's more interesting is that the caves mentioned in the official reports include the Temple of Isis, the Tower of Seth, the Domain of Horus, the Chamber of Cheops, the Eye or Tower of Ra, the Temple of Ammon, the Temple of Buddha, the Temple of Krishna, and the Temple of Sheba or Belkis. Hieroglyphs were found on the walls, and many of the caves are named after the gods of the Egyptian civilization.
Isn't it too symbolic and godly to name empty caves?
Right? Imagine, everything is a lie, but the area is protected by large climbing ramps, supply lines, and military helicopters. And do you believe that this is all a fabrication?
I remember David Hatcher Childress. He is a researcher who has written more than 200 books. He has devoted his life to researching and writing about ancient civilizations. And he talks about the work that governments have done on these subjects and how they have covered them up. There is one point that he and other researchers like him have emphasized. If you have seen the Indiana Jones movies, there's a scene where Indiana Jones finds the Ark of the Covenant, and the U.S. government finally puts it in a protective case and stores it in a huge government warehouse. The warehouse contains everything from alien bodies to mysterious historical relics. They claim that a similar warehouse is used by the Smithsonian Institution itself, and that many extraordinary discoveries made in both North and South America and around the world were preserved in these warehouses.
Is that so?
Yeah. And to give a few examples in support of these claims, in 1930, skeletons about 3 meters tall were found during excavations in an area known as the Spiral Mounds. In 1892, excavations in Alabama by Frank Bounds found stone tombs about 4 meters long and skeletons close to 4 meters tall were found in them. Similarly, during World War II, the contractor company tasked with establishing a base in Alaska found skeletal remains of people as large as 5 meters under the ground. And the interesting point is that all these excavations were carried out by the Smithsonian Institution, and then the findings were sent to the museum's regulations. In 1984, Professor Federico, who was in charge of the excavation unit, wrote a petition to the Institute asking for information about these discoveries. Although the museum acknowledged that the remains had reached them, they somehow wrote a petition stating that all the remains disappeared later and sent it to Professor Federico. For 8 years, no one was informed differently, and all subsequent news was denied, as in the Kincaid case. In later discussions, it was stated that the remains were preserved in museum storage, but due to the release of poisonous asbestos gas there, it was forbidden for an indefinite period of time for outsiders to examine the remains.
Let me guess, the events were covered up again.
Of course.
When these and similar events are examined, it becomes apparent that there is a whole history of humanity that is being suppressed and hidden. Of course, we are in a period when all these facts that we are discussing here are considered by both governments and mainstream science and historians as the most absurd and fairy tale-like subjects.
Exactly. And when people who do research are humiliated by being called dreamers and fools, and other people ensure that these researchers are excluded from society with herd psychology.
But when you look at this from a bigger perspective, you can see that it's not just for this period. Remember that people who did research in ancient times were first humiliated and then executed by the Inquisition.
Yeah, thankfully, today's world is turning thanks to those brave people who sacrificed their lives, and science continues to progress in the light of their teachings. Remember that bodies die one day, but ideas are immortal.
We Phoenix
and Simurgh
get to stay under our wings to move forward and become enlightened.